We have Claire on in, and she is the Associate Director now at Datassential. When did that new title happen?
That was about last year, I think.
Was it really? I'm behind the times. I looked it up too last time we talked. I mean, I knew it'd been a little bit of time, but time flies by. I thought it was 6 months or so ago. It was actually more than a year ago, the last time you were with us. Yeah, I was kind of surprised at that. And then we've got a new sponsor, so lentils.org. Amber Johnson's the Director of Marketing and Communications, and Jeff Miller is here as well, and he is a consultant in the national account area for them. Many of our members know Jeff, or even sponsors know Jeff too from his past with working with Duncan and some other brands. So really happy to have the two of you as a new sponsor for ICCA and have you with us to give us some great detailed information on that. So that being said, let's just go straight to you, Amber. Let's have you talk to us a little bit about the organization, and then Claire will have a presentation as well, and then we'll go to some Q&A.
It's a great opportunity for us to tell you a little bit more about ourselves before we get into the fun stuff with Claire when we dig into the data. So first, just a brief introduction of ourselves. We are Lentils.org. We're essentially a commodity board, similar to others that you may know. I know Potatoes USA, our friends over there, are part of ICCA as well. So we function very similarly. We work on behalf of and are funded by our over 15,000 pulse and lentil growers up in Canada to basically represent our ingredient in market. So our team really works to increase lentil usage, specifically on U.S. food service menus. We offer marketing, food service operations, and culinary expertise to operators with our team. And myself on here today, and Chef James, you may already know as well through his other client role through ICCA with Dual Packaged Foods. So he works on our team as well. Our team really is focused on U.S. food service, but we are also part of a larger Pulse innovation team with expertise in processing, fractionation, reformulation and functionality, sustainability, and health and nutrition. So if there are questions ever in other areas like that, more linked to food science, processing, or especially sustainability, we do have other team members that specialize and have technical expertise in those specific areas. So where are we going to start? So I've already used the term pulse a couple times. I catch myself. So that we like to start with whenever we're with new people. So what is the term pulses or a pulse crop? So lentils are a pulse. And when we use the term pulse, we're talking about the dry edible seed of legumes. So that includes lentils, chickpeas, dry beans, and dry peas in that family of pulses. And as you can see on the chart on your screen, all pulses are legumes. But not all legumes are pulses. So legumes also include in different families fresh products like fresh peas and fresh beans, as well as soybeans and peanuts. So soybeans and peanuts, think about it this way. If you crush or you grind a soybean or a peanut, you come up with an oily texture. We know peanut butter, we know soybean oil, etc. So those are oil-based essentially. Whereas if you grind up pulses, you come up with a dry powder, which we call flour. So that's a key differentiator. So that dry edible seed of a legume. Pulses also hold really unique sustainability attributes separate from the rest of the family of legumes. So we're going to talk about that in a subsequent slide here today. So why lentils? Again, we'll touch on sustainability, health, and nutrition, but of course we will not forget about taste. We know taste is king, and all of these other great things are not important if food does not taste good, as we know. So we will touch on these now. So we'll start first with sustainability. So I've got a couple, I don't have the two terms up on the screen, but sustainability is hot. It's been hot for a while. The new popular term is actually regenerative. I'm sure we've all heard the term regenerative agriculture quite a bit lately as well. Let's talk a little bit first about what these two terms mean when it comes to agriculture. So sustainable agriculture seeks to maintain and cease degradation of the land, while regenerative agriculture seeks to restore the land, promote soil health, and provide ecosystem services. But really their essence of both of these principles are really truly the same, and the way we measure them is also the same. So we'll talk a bit about that. It's also really important to discuss the sustainability of a food product through a number of different lenses or metrics. If you look at one and only one, like water footprint, for example, that's not really a clear picture of the true sustainability of an ingredient. So it's important we look at all of these little areas in sequence. So first, carbon, that's kind of the big bad and the ugly of the sustainability world. That's the thing everyone is measuring and trying to draw down carbon usage. And so really the takeaway here, and what I want you to learn, is that lentils are actually net negative when it comes to carbon emissions. So more carbon is actually sunk or sequestered into the ground when growing lentils than emitted into the atmosphere while they're being produced. So what that means is basically there's fewer machinery passes through a field when lentils are grown, and the vast amount of land that we have here up in Canada, where I'm from, it creates this really, really great carbon sink, which stores all of that carbon and makes use of it in the agriculture system. The other key point is water. So low water footprint with lentils, there's actually no added water to the system when you grow lentils. The only water added to the system is from environmental precipitation, if it happens. So if it rains, awesome. If it doesn't, lentils and other pulses will actually survive a drought situation much better than other crops. It's not ideal, your yield will certainly be down, but they do very, very well under drought conditions and semi-arid conditions. So another key takeaway there on water. When growing lentils, you actually improve the soil health and biodiversity overall. So one key thing here, and which is specific and unique to pulses, is nitrogen fixation. So the roots of the lentils actually form nodules that work with the soil to create their own nitrogen. So that reduces the need for nitrogen fertilizer when you're growing lentils and actually stores extra in the ground to be used for the subsequent crop grown on that piece of land. Farmers in Western Canada also regularly practice no-till or no tillage. So think back to the dirty 30s when you saw all the soil blowing away, being eroded, but right in front of our eyes. We don't do that anymore. We don't run a tractor through the field and work up the stubble and roots and debris from other crops anymore. We let it stay in the ground, and that acts as a basically a wind barrier. It keeps that ground intact. Those root systems and all that debris hold that soil together so that it's not vulnerable to weather conditions. This also, again, minimizes tractors going through the field, minimizes emissions and unnecessary use of carbon. Another key point here is just sustainable crop rotation. So again, in Western Canada, it's very, very typical to follow long crop rotations. So from anywhere from 7 years, where we're planting different crops on a single piece of farmland every year. And what that does is it works to naturally combat weed, disease, and insect cycles that can build up when you're constantly growing the same crop on a piece of land. So all of these practices together really improve and increase net soil health and biodiversity over time. And just one quick note about zero waste, basically any kind of debris from the plant, so stems, pods, shells, that sort of thing, after the plant is harvested, is redistributed back onto the land behind the tractor as natural compost. So reincorporating that into the soil and making it healthy and robust. Switching gears a little bit here into health and nutrition. So really simple, high-level takeaways. In that half-cup cooked serving of lentils, you're going to receive 12 grams of protein and 8 grams of fiber with only 140 calories. So this combination of protein and fiber is really, really important. That's what creates the satiating effect of lentils, which works to curb hunger and give you that long burn, long lasting energy throughout the day rather than spiking and lowering the blood sugar over time. So whether you're really innovating around lentils as the star of the dish or simply adding them to an existing concept, they really pack really quality nutrition in. So a little more on health and nutrition here, specifically honing in on some key protein sources. So lentils are one of the highest sources of plant protein available to consumers on the market. In that same 1/2 cup cooked serving of lentils, you're going to see about the same amount of protein as 2 eggs, about the same amount of fiber, or it's 3 times the amount of fiber compared to the same serving size of quinoa or barley, and as much as a bowl of bran flakes. And again, that satiation is key there. Also strong in other nutrients found in animal proteins like iron, zinc, and folate as well. And this is a bit of an eye chart here, but what we really want to focus here to close the gap on the nutrition slides is we asked the consumer what the benefits they saw in lentils overall were, and they ranked healthy, high in protein and high in fiber at the top and followed by taste. So we know consumers basically know these attributes inherently, right? So we know not to menu around the concept of health or healthy, but this underscores that notion that there is that natural health halo around lentils, and consumers inherently know that if they're eating something with lentils, it's going to be a bit healthier for them. So now taste. I usually get Chef James to present this slide, so bear with me here. His accent is a little bit more exciting than mine when presenting the culinary concepts, but really these are the top 5 reasons that we like to talk about lentils to chefs. And taste obviously is the big one. But on that same kind of journey, versatility is really important. We'll get to some of the different concepts and applications that lentils can really easily been incorporated into on food service menus, but you'll see that they really span the menu and the day parts. Affordability and food costs, especially with all the supply chain challenges right now, really, really important. Lentils really are very low cost, and they're a high quality protein source that does not currently have the same supply challenges as some other protein sources as well. So good for the bottom line, whether you're just trying to cut menu cost overall in light of inflation, or if you're just looking to save some money on the core of a product and then be able to add in higher value kind of garnishes and aspects like that, they're a great tool for the menu. Satiation, we talked about as well already. So that ability to keep your consumer full. There is this inherent notion that maybe more plant-forward or plant-based dishes aren't going to fill a consumer up. They're concerned about that. That innate satiation of the protein and fiber of the dish is going to combat that. So your consumers are going to be full, they're going to be satisfied, and they're going to come back for repurchase. On trend, so plant forward, global cuisines, Kevin already mentioned this. This was talked about at GCIA and in some recent presentations. These are on trend with consumers. We're seeing this, we have seen it for quite a bit of time, but they're a great kind of means to transport you through those global cuisines and leverage a more plant forward approach. And of course, taste. So we can go on and on about that part. We've got amazing recipe database that Chef James has helped us create. But we'll just touch on a few of those applications that really stand out to us when we look at food service menus before we flip to a quick case study and turn it over to Claire here. So a few of the applications and concepts that we love for food service menus. Power bowls is one. We love combining lentils with other whole grains to make a really nutritious and filling base for a bowl. But also salad bar items. So things like cold, composed, or marinated salads are also super popular at cafes. Salad bars and buffet concepts. Blends where you combine and stretch animal protein with plant protein like lentils. It's also a popular approach which leads to cost savings, a more sustainable dish, and one with a more balanced nutritional. We're also hearing a lot that many consumers, especially Gen Z, are moving away from the desire for plant-based analog products mimicking meat and instead looking for whole food plant-based options. So concepts like crumbles, like the one on the screen, this one is pictured here using lentils, mushrooms, and walnuts, used as a taco filling, but could also be used crumbled on top of pizzas or flatbreads, on nachos, or as a bolognese starter and more. Protein boxes, a very common and popular grab-and-go item, focused around high protein snack components. Here we have a lentil dip, but could be combined with crackers, some crudité, a composed salad, or more to be combined into a really great satiating snack to be eaten throughout the day on the go. And finally, lentil flour. This is kind of a fun niche one, but lentil flour can be used in fried breading and coating systems to provide a crispier coating held warm for longer. And if you have questions about that, please reach out. We've got a great white paper that goes into that in more detail. But I'm going to turn things over now to Jeff here. He's going to talk a bit about how we work with operators quickly and share a fun case study from this group.
I'm going to go through these 2 slides very quickly. Look forward to meeting you all in person and working with you. So how we work with operators, as Amber mentioned, this is very similar to many approaches with really kind of top tier commodity boards. So we support your menu innovation. We're here to augment, we're here to help kind of give you what you need through perhaps innovation and white paper concept creation. We can do concept showcase at your facility, or we can do it at a centralized location. We can do it a working innovation kitchen session to refine these ideas. We've done that with a lot of folks. And then once we've decided on the ideas, we love to, at our expense, put them through scores testing so that you have the data that you need internally to sell that dish into leadership, especially if you're passionate about it. I know as a VP of R&D, there's been many a project or product that I've had a passion for that I've had to build the case for to sell internally to my franchisees or my leadership. But we also do menu and marketing support for launch once a product goes to launch. So we can do some promotions, some campaigns, perhaps contesting or in-store collateral. We can support that as well. And let me give you a quick example of how this came to life with one case study. Actually, this is with an ICCA member. So this is about as real world gets. And we did ask Chef Alex at Twin Peaks if we could share this. So, we started with a variety of these concepts that Chef Alex helped us narrow, these white paper concepts. We refined them down to 3 that we put into scores testing. And the one you see here on the screen, which is a chicken street corn salad, this was based on a recipe that Lentils.org provided, but it was an incredibly high scoring concept. We took that item, refined it further, or I should say Chef Alex did that. He put it into market test and it was their most successful test ever. Again, we were shocked. We love lentils. We know we're a supporting cast member. And this dish just did so well. It actually outsold the entire rest of the salad category. So that was tested in, I think, 9 different stores across a variety of markets here in the US. So it wasn't just something that was in a pocket somewhere. It took that idea of a healthy-ish dish without talking about health and just had a lot of those health cues in the background and really took off for them. So because it took off so well, they highlighted it as a signature menu item and they decided to launch it as a permanent menu item. So it has that beautiful elote ingredient. So you've got your aioli, you've got your roasted corn, some jalapeno, of course, the lentils. They sprinkled on some of their wonderful billionaire's bacon, they call it, and there's a grilled chicken option to put on top. And as we all know, that secret menu way of winning is to always put bacon on everything. So we definitely needed to do that. We're also working to replace an existing grain rice combo with a lentil and rice combo. So just replace that other grain out instead of that we would add in the lentil. And what that does, again, here, they were so surprised and so impressed at how full people were from the dish and how much they liked it. You can imagine the person maybe at this restaurant wants to go there and eat and go home and be able to say that they chose something healthy but still felt full. And so that's what the lentil does. And we're looking at replacing that grain with lentils throughout the rest of the menu as well.
Claire, you're on.
So we're going to do a presentation on the world of building blocks is what I decided to talk about. So there's a little bit of plant-based, but more the elements that we can use, sort of talking the same examples that we just saw, how we can use how we can use lentils in different ways and relating to other kind of overall themes. So we're going to talk about some big trends, and we have to start with global because we've already said that so very many times. This is actually from our plant-based inspiration report. What I work on at Datassential is our inspiration report. So pretty much everything that we're seeing here, for the most part, is pulled from those. And why I wanted to highlight these global dishes is exactly what was mentioned before, which is for a long time, we were talking about plant-based from the perspective of let's think about all these analogs, when it turns out perhaps the future of that area is in fact just actually using plants, strangely enough. And there's so much inspiration from global dishes in that area. And when you look at what you see growing on menus, you see the start. You'll notice the menu penetration on this slide. Lots of stuff is really tiny, but tiny doesn't mean that it isn't going to be relevant. It just means that there's a lot of room for growth, and lots of that is actually very rapid. So you'll see that there's a lot that we've probably all started hearing about. There's this tofu makhani, which instead of paneer does in fact use tofu. And makhani is sort of an interesting one to make vegan, given how it has butter and cream often at the forefront. I thought that was an interesting example. And it of course comes from Canada, where I guess these things are a little bit more common. We also have a look overall. You wouldn't think, I saw in the data when it came out, some of our newer data this summer, lentil stew in general was growing, but some of that driven by DAL and actually describing it as such on menus for consumers who might be a little less familiar. And it's growing across restaurant segments, but perhaps surprisingly, specifically at QSR restaurants. And lots of that is just as we watch that shift in the QSR segment makeup. You know, first we saw some Mexican happening there, then we saw Mediterranean, then Middle Eastern, and now we're starting to finally see some Indian types of flavors happening in that area. And so here are some stats on that. And then just a pretty picture on the dal makhani, and we saw on the other side there was dal tadka. Tadka in general, I think we're actually covering it as a flavor, which I guess is perhaps a bit of a misnomer since it's a concept of making flavors more powerful. But that's actually one of the themes we'll be talking about next year, if I'm not mistaken, at Datassential, which is, you know, the idea of blooming those spices in oil and using them as a textural component. And lentils and other pulses are a great way to sort of start that flavor. Lentil soup being something people are familiar with, but you can do a lot of twists with it if you lean to global flavors that are very approachable. And then I think everyone on the call has seen probably gazillions of these, but this is our menu adoption cycle. This one is on pulses, though if to the discerning eye, you'll notice that there are in fact some non-pulse and more legume items on here, just because we do want to have them all in one place for our clients. So if you see edamame and you're wondering what I'm doing, I do know that it's on there, but we did want some dishes as well on here. And I guess what it highlights is how there is a lentil or another item for any part of the menu adoption cycle you want to play in. So if you're doing, the way we would think about this is if you're thinking of highlighting maybe a less familiar lentil, something like a red lentil, you would want to perhaps consider more familiar flavors to pair with it. Whereas if you're doing a more traditional kind of a green or brown lentil, you could be a little bit more adventurous with your flavors, which is less traditional, as red lentils tend to be those with more adventurous flavors. But that's how we would think about this. And then we have a classic chart where we have our menu penetration of all these items, the 12-month growth and the 4-year growth. And this is on app, entree, side menus. And you can quickly see that lentils are among the top here. One thing that I feel like is alarming, and when I pulled this, I was sad as a personal fan of pulses. I was like, oh, these were all having such a good year a couple of years ago. Now we're starting to see it kind of flatten and soften. What we'll see in a couple slides is it's actually that those who have menued them are actually finding new applications for them. So if you find success, you actually want to continue using and finding new applications. But we're seeing if you don't decide to broaden them and figure out that versatility, they're falling off the menu, which is probably a misstep when we see some of these innovative uses moving forward. And the fact that we're starting to see them integrated in retail offerings. I don't think a couple of years ago you would have seen a mainstream frozen food item that features Mediterranean style lentil bowls. All those flavors in there would have seemed unusual 5-10 years ago. And now it's part of a mainstream frozen food item, which is just increasing people's familiarity with them and also their familiarity with how they can be a source of keeping you full for longer. And then we also have this retail item where they are gaining familiarity even, as a snack option. All right. Next slide, and Amber kind of mentioned this a little bit, the crumb, looking frenzy to look at lentils and other pulses as the plant-based, plant-forward way forward rather than those analogs. So this is one of the key mega trends we saw when we looked overall at pulses, and that's usage as ground meat. And I did not pull these custom for this presentation. This is just what happens to be in the inspiration report. The most common pulse used for these applications is in fact lentils. This was exactly ready to go. If you log into your Datassential and you happen to have Report Pro, you will see these are all just as they are in the report. And you can see all those applications in there. There's one that has a grain and lentil crumble as the topping for a pizza, filling for an empanada, usage of the lentil walnut taco meat in kind of a wrap, and then usage of those beluga lentils that keep their shape even more than other lentils, which already keep their shape well for the most part in a shepherd's pie. And then a closer look at a sausage take with the millet and lentil, a different operator offering it. And you can really see that it does actually look pretty similar to a crumble. Here we have the usages for those pulses and more on menus and what's top and what's most growing. And what we see when we look at the most growing is you do see a ton of those kind of Mexican Southwest type of applications, your bowls, your street tacos, as well as other global favorites. So tons of different bowls and the flavors of things like tinga and ramen, which is more on there from edamame. We did want to look at how those applications are happening at major chains, and I pulled from our scores database, which we've already talked about. I think everyone, for the most part on the call, is familiar, but if you need a refresher, that's where we test our new items and limited time offers from major chains, and we do all these different metrics. And to the far left side, we actually see an example of what Jeff talked about, where that component is actually being utilized and starting to replace the double grain as the bowl or the dish base for this chicken street corn salad, where you can add that chicken. And it actually does, the score is a specialty appeal, which makes sense. Necessarily grilled chicken isn't what everyone orders when they go out, but it has really high purchase intent and fairly high uniqueness, given that it is, chicken on a bed of something. The next application that we're seeing for all of these pulses is usage as a dipper or spread. Of course, hummus is the quintessential classic, but you can do anything else with it. This particular sandwich highlights the black lentil pate from operator that's always known for doing kind of veg forward things. Then we have, of course, as a burrito or taco filling, this example is just classic rice and beans. And then lastly, it's that texture and protein addition to main rice dishes, such as using, in this case, edamame for a short rib fried rice. Next, we're looking at those trending terms paired with lentils on menus. And this is where I think it really starts to reflect what I was saying about, new applications and new ways of using things. And I meant to highlight it on the application page, and we can go back if we need to, but almost every application for pulses, and in this case, you can see this list of top trending pairings for lentils on menus. It just reads as a top trending list. Like, these are all the things that are top trending in general. Which really shows some versatility there. These are the themes you would talk about if you were talking about in general trending terms, which really demonstrates how they can be used in any application. Another menu adoption cycle, because if we're going to share information with you, we might as well pack it full of good stuff. And the savory bowl menu adoption cycle is another one that I personally, as kind of the leader of our menu adoption cycles, I struggle with this one, because you could really put anything every bowl, the list of every ingredient. So much responsibility to choose which ones to highlight on this Mac. It probably seems like I'm talking about Indian a lot. In the data, it really makes sense. We are just starting to see all of these terms starting to take off, and it's certainly one of those global cuisines that is not yet fully established. So it's a great place to jump on the trend, and it's a great place for lentils in general, because there are so many ways that they can be used. This one featuring, a veggie croquette next to a yellow lentil dal, and then a number of other ways of utilizing them, including this chicken tikka masala bowl, which could really have any base, and it would make a nice menu item. And then again, overall bowls, just as we saw, dal growing as well as lentils are growing at QSR still. And within bowls, lentils are a growing element of those, even specifically at QSR. And lastly, I wanted to go into our scores database and look at what's happening with the top bowls currently. So I looked just past year. So these are really current menu examples. The top one by our composite score is a loaded steak and potato bowl. Of course, a classic steak and potato item is going to have the top score. But what perhaps is more surprising is if you focus first on the composite score, this one very closely related to it, sticking with Southwest kind of Mexican-esque theme. Has a really similar profile with actually higher uniqueness and nearly the same purchase intent. And then the next item, it's not one of the top bowls. You can see that the score is composite score is lower, but again, you still have that really high purchase intent. And I think what's most important here is if we look at those draw scores, these interesting takes that have global influence, the Mediterranean and the kind of Southwest Mexican type theme going on, have really high draw, as well as pretty high frequency ratings, 4 out of 5 and 3 out of 5, which means they get a specific consumer. If you're interested in this item, you're going to be coming back often for it. And you would go there just for that item. So in their own little way, these global bowl takes are actually quite craveable to a particular consumer set, and one that may actually not find something else they love on a menu, a more of that health forward consumer potentially. And then we did look at top salads. We, very closely related to a bowl at this point. One of the top growing terms in bowls is actually salad. So we need to talk about those too, especially given that they are a good platform for something like lentils. This one here at the side it's just a reminder of the importance of that textural contrast and how different ingredients can do that. Everyone on the call has all of their own tricks. And lentils, we've already heard of how they can be part of it. But these top salads, all a 99 superstar, all vastly different scores in all of the other different elements. One thing they have in common is that textural element, whether it's from actually just having taquitos on the side or it's tortilla strips and mango. The other one that I find pretty interesting and I wanted to highlight, which is why I picked this Buffalo Ranch chicken salad.
I was really surprised at a few things, but Amber, I'll start with you. That, when you were talking about some of the different things like the water footprint, you don't water the plants at all. I had no idea. That's crazy. Is it just because of exactly, and is that one of the reasons that so much of the growth of lentils are in the area that, that you guys grow in?
Yeah, it's just common practice that most of the, staple crops, if you will, in our area, that's just the case. So to give you an idea of the expanse of our cropland, there are about 2 million acres of lentils planted. That's just lentils. That's not wheat. That's not canola. That's not all farmland. Every year in just the province I live in. So I live in Saskatchewan. We are kind of the breadbasket of the world, if you will. We have the majority of the arable cropland in Canada. And there's 2 million acres of lentils planted on average every year. So you just can't, like water is a scarce resource. You just simply can't irrigate all of that land. And, there are farmers putting in more and more irrigation every year, but you're going to use that on crops that need more water. So they're going to put that in on pieces of land that are growing other more water requiring crops and leave the pulses out of that scenario, with the exception of dry beans. Dry beans are fairly water intensive compared to other pulses. They require irrigation in many cases. So yeah, it's a story that not a lot of people know or understand, but we're certainly dealing with a much larger nature of farms and farmland in total than you may be familiar with in other kind of more urban adjacent places, especially in the US.
Yeah, what I think is really cool too is, that story is great for, consumers today, especially the younger generations, right? And that's a big part of what they're looking at when they're looking at the menu is what can I do, the decisions I make that are actually better for the environment. So I think that's really cool. And the no-till practice. I mean, those are things that, getting into this, I did say to a few people here in the last, especially when we were in San Diego during the GCIA combine, is, I love when we have new sponsors like you guys, because it's a great learning curve for me too, right? It's, getting deeper into something like this is really helpful to really understand, the nuances of a certain product, so that's really cool. Hey, Jeff, on your front too, why don't you talk to us? Because I know you're talking, mano a mano, chef to chef with people about the product and some new ideas and things that people can do. Can you take us through, maybe some other, areas where I know some of the chains may not want you to talk specifically about things you're working on at this point in time, but things you can talk about. And, and is it addressed, both from a plant forward and plant-based idea?
Yeah, I would say that the the kind of what's interesting to people varies based on what their goals are from a menu strategy standpoint or a company standpoint. So some companies that we've had a lot of engagement with really latch onto the sustainability piece. Like we had a operator who said, wow, I just had no idea they were carbon negative, and this can help us, achieve some carbon goals. And then we dug into the different menu attributes about it. Others were just kind of shocked at the quality of your red lentil versus what we all learned in culinary school, which was the black beluga lentil or the French petite green. You can make them ahead of time, or you can have a commissary make them. So I always think about, where do I want to put my complexity? Do I want to put it in the restaurant? Do I want to put it at the 17-year-old at the counter, or do I want to put it back on a manufacturer or a co-manufacturer? So you can decide that, and they're going to hold up really well for you. And then on plant forward, I think we're probably most successful in areas where we're not trying to be plant only or healthy. Like we have these beautiful piadinas that have that lentil, mushroom crumble on there. But if you wanted to put prosciutto on there as a garnish, it's going to be just as amazing and delicious. Or bacon. If you wanted to make a bolognese and use turkey plus lentils, that's actually where we're seeing a lot of the best tasting dishes on that plant forward versus plant only side.
That's cool. And this is a segue to you, Claire. When you're looking at consumers, we throw a lot of industry terms around all the time. Plant forward, plant based. How much confusion is there in the general public when we talk? Do they really know the difference between the two?
I don't think so. Not in general, and Claire can probably speak to this better than myself. But we try to be conscious of not being exclusionary, because we know there is a single-digit percentage of the population truly interested in vegan and solely plant-based dishes. So plant forward is certainly the approach we try to cognizantly take. Plant-based is great for some. Some others just want to know what they're eating and can see it and understand a label and that whole fruit approach. I think again, Claire can speak more to this. I think is kind of what's on the horizon as the next plant forward approach to really watch is going back to maybe not the plant-based patty of the 80s that had your green peas and it was this limp awful textural experience, but what is that whole food approach of the future, where you know the ingredients, you can see them, they're just plants in their true form and self, and doing something really interesting on the menu. I think, and I hope that's kind of where things go next in terms of, I don't know, Claire, are we plant forward 4.0, 5.0 now? I've lost track, but I think that's an interesting one to watch.
Yeah, when I don't know, 4.0 or 5.0. I will say Datassential took a while to decide. All of our clients were saying, you need a plant-based filter, you need a plant-based filter. And we didn't make one, and we had all of our workarounds, and we just finally released one we're pretty happy with. I think there's still some tweaks to be had. And it's exactly what you said, Amber. It's because we wanted it to flag things that have these plant forward elements, but we don't want it to exclude protein, because that's just not going to be the way forward for the vast majority of consumers. And even if it is at home, it's not necessarily the way forward for how they will choose to dine out. And I think that's the key. Even if you switch to it all the way home, there's so many consumers that have always had their vegetarian ways at home, and when they go out, that's when they want to, maybe they don't care for preparing meat, maybe they don't want to source high quality seafood, and when they go out, that's their moment for it, but they still want that same to make the best choice for the environment and for their health. So that is the way that we ended up going.
Yeah, it's interesting. And, looking at that, one of the things that Mushroom Council had success over the last decade with was that blended, and they became their whole marketing theme, and that's all that they did, right? And it was huge. And it was, at a time where, again, it was a spike in particular beef prices. That's why they were doing it, or where it really came from. And it's kind of a similar thing too with lentils, right? Where you guys can really sit there and look at going, all right, we can reduce your base cost by blending some of this product in and giving it a nice little twist from a marketing perspective too.
I will say, while the majority of the world's lentils are produced in Canada, we are very humble and most of us don't know that. Those of us who live very close to the farm gate maybe don't know that we produce a lot of lentils. The humble Canadian maybe doesn't know all of what we produce or do a great job of using it either. So I don't think there's any big, huge takeaways there. We see a lot of lentils served side by side, especially fish entrees, other animal protein entrees as a side. Nice braises, that sort of thing, and very popular in salad and bowl concepts as well.
Probably from an operator standpoint, the main pieces are it increases hold time and it increases crispiness. It also helps develop color, and you can potentially remove an allergen if you have a dairy in your wash step. So we'll drop that into the chat. We'd love to chat more about it. The downside there is it's not going to be as cost effective as using a wheat flour, unfortunately.
And mushrooms do a great job in the blend at bringing that umami and bringing that great flavor. But unfortunately, what you lose is the protein, and you're losing some protein in that dish. So the nice thing to incorporate lentils back in with the mushrooms, which is one approach that we use a lot of the time, is you're retaining that protein component to that dish, adding the satiety and the fiber in, reducing that carbon footprint of the dish, but making sure that it tastes really, really great at the same time. So a lot of potential there, a lot of ways to apply that blend across the menu, and it's a great tool for sure.
Awesome. One of the questions I had, Claire, when you were doing your presentation, actually with both of you, because you're explaining the pulses, and there's some obviously, I don't want to say confusion in it, but there's a lot of different people that, look at, when you're categorizing things, right, how they put it in, and there's a true form to do it. And then there's some that are added in, like edamame, as you brought up, Claire.
Yeah, it's just a terminology thing, right? So, it's the same way, in Canada, we call chickpeas. In the US, for many years, they were called garbanzo beans. It's all sort of just a terminology preference thing. A lot of people use the term beans and they mean pulses as a category. Pasta and lentils with a simple kind of oil-based vinaigrette and some chili flakes and herbs. A great, really approachable dish, holds well nicely on a buffet line. We see things like that more so, I would say, in non-com right now, but really approachable, straightforward, down the middle dish that I think a lot of people in terms of general consumer base can sort of understand and get their head around. So I think it's got a lot of opportunity, and, hopefully we see that pop up in more volume locations soon.
One other thing I saw during the presentation that I really absolutely love was that lentil sausage pizza. Can you guys go off on, especially the crumble? I mean, what are some other things people were doing with it? Because it looked amazing to me.
Yeah, the crumble is a lot of fun. It's really so versatile, right? Like any topping, filling. James loves talking about it as a bolognese starter. So a really great sort of plant-based bolognese base. And then you can kind of add your sauce and your tomato from there. But it's so versatile. I'm sure I'm forgetting different ways to use it, Jeff, if you want to add in there. But really anything you can top or crumble it over, it works so great, and it looks great. And you can also flavor it and move that around the world, right? Like obviously a taco seasoning is kind of the first thing you think of, but how can you use, a Mediterranean profile or a Moroccan profile to it to transport, an LTO or a certain specific dish into that region? I think it's got a lot of opportunity.
I will say, for the question that we had of what's happening in Canada, I did take a peek in our Canadian data, which was not featured on the webinar, and there are applications of some of the ones that nobody was doing it last year, and now there are a handful of instances. There's nachos, which would be an example of the crumble. There's lasagna, which is usage of the bolognese sauce. There's pairings with salmon, just of course, as you said, and then things like fritter, falafel that actually calls out lentil instead. And those are some that are showing up in the data.
Thanks. We're very happy to have you guys as a sponsor and look forward to doing more. I know I learned so much, in this last week, actually, from you guys and what's going on. So look forward to sharing more of that.